of June, which is the middle of the year. It's kind of wild. I don't know how y'all do it at 8 o'clock in the morning, but salute to all the 8 a.m. warriors, early morning folks doing their thing. So much going on in the world today, but I wanted to start off with a little good news. Not that there's bad news or anything, but want to just chop it up a little bit about Dr. Lisa Cook. This really amazing economist has finally been confirmed by the Senate. President Biden nominated Lisa Cook, I believe it was in early February. But Lisa Cook was nominated to be, on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. And she's actually the first Black woman to not just be nominated, but to ascend to this role and actually be confirmed. Now, why is that exciting and important, right? I'm sure some of us are getting tired of historic firsts. I mean, I feel you. I understand. It's oh, here we go, another historic first. But while the Biden administration has a lot to be criticized on, there are actually some things that the Biden administration is getting right with some of these nominations and the confirmations by the Senate. Dr. Lisa Cook is definitely one of them. So Dr. Cook is someone that is very well versed in terms of what are the racial dynamics in our economic system. So when we're looking at the Federal Reserve, we're looking at the rate setting, we're looking at, overseeing in terms of how the federal government, setting interest rates for things like the housing market and just other areas that are impacted by the rate adjustments. We just saw the Fed is increasing the rate to quote unquote combat inflation. Having someone with Dr. Lisa Cook who is very much into the legal arguments around or the economic arguments around reparations and understanding the deep root of systemic racism in our economic system here in the United States is definitely, the type of impact and voice needed in these conversations and discussions. So will one Black woman change it all? No. They always turn to us when things are in crisis and need to be fixed, like we saw with, the conversation around soon-to-be Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, but with Dr. Cook going into that seat, it breaks through, the mold of having to be a certain type of person with a certain type of educational background and credentials to be able to get in there. She's absolutely, a PhD. She's well-studied, well-respected in her field. I got to talk with Mark Morrell, the national president of the National Urban League, about her nomination a couple months back, and one thing he was insisting on, that she absolutely had to be confirmed. The Senate could not back down and allow Senate Republicans to, run over her the same way they try to do with a number of Black women that have been, and other women of color who have been before them. We saw similar attacks on Dr. Lisa Cook, not to the same degree and level as with KBJ's confirmation process, or even with, Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark, but we saw similar racially tinged, racially tweaked attacks against her nomination, questioning whether or not she was even qualified to lead. I mean, quite honestly, by the time you're getting to the point that you're being nominated to serve on, nationally recognized segments of the federal government, you pretty much have an extensive history, career, educational background, unless you're being nominated by somebody like Trump, who just nominates anybody off the street. But with Dr. Cook, definitely someone who is well-versed in economic matters, definitely someone who has a very clear grasp on what is needed to help move the country forward. Now, will these little tweaks and changes, create the racial justice, harmony, equity we all, deserve and need? No, but it's definitely a positive move on behalf of the Biden administration. And, it's a good look seeing Dr. Cook go on to be a part of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors once she's sworn in. So that confirmation literally just happened. I think they tried to take a confirmation vote about a week and a half ago, and two members of the Democratic caucus actually had, I think, were out with COVID, and so they were unable to vote. And so her confirmation it temporarily got sidelined. At that point, Senate Democrats were insistent that they were going to take another vote that they were going to push forward when they had their full 50, and Vice President Kamala Harris actually cast the tie-breaking vote, adding to the historic nature of this confirmation. Vice President Harris had to pass the tie-breaking vote. If only legislation could pass in this way without the filibuster, but here we are, and Dr. LeCook is going to be doing her thing. So it sounds pretty good. This is so bad because like my whole plan to take over the world is in this shot this morning. But there you see, behind me what I'm up to. So next up, we have, there's quite a few things happening today. I mean, I think another thing that's happening is Elon Musk, part of his whole Twitter takeover, has indicated that he has plans to allow Donald Trump back onto the platform, right? Whether or not Trump will come back on the platform, who knows? He's a stubborn crybaby. But Elon Musk has said he would reverse Twitter's Trump ban. And I mean, the thing about him reversing the Trump ban also goes along with his his antagonistic approach to platform accountability and platform content management, right? It is extremely rare and really reserved for certain types of accounts. But quite honestly, like whether or not you personally think it's correct is not the standard, right? And so, and the fact that Elon Musk is of the opinion that we should allow folks like Donald Trump to incite violence, we should allow folks like Donald Trump to lie on such a large scale just because we don't want to alienate people is also part of the problem, right? Instead of understanding the problem in terms of why Donald Trump was removed from the platform. Like Donald Trump, it took a lot. Let's just be real, right? It took a lot for Twitter to able to even get to the point where it was suspending the president, let alone the permanent ban, right? We've seen the same thing happen with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and oh my God, I'm forgetting the congresswoman's name from Colorado that poses with the guns, MTG's buddy. But anyway, it took a lot for them to even be suspended on the platform for things that they have done as well, right? So now we have Elon Musk, who is not just, he's definitely poking the bear, and it's just going to be interesting to see like how people react and what happens if and when Elon Musk does, finally officially not only own Twitter, but step into, it's rumored that he's going to actually be acting CEO for a period of time after the sale is final, after his ownership is finalized, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see what exactly, the steps he takes in terms of not just whether or not he reverses this ban. I mean, there are many other accounts along with Trump that have been banned and removed from the site, but also thinking about some of the content moderation steps that Twitter has been taking. And again, Twitter took these steps not just out of the goodness of their heart, but because people have been actively pushing for platform accountability. You also have a lot of folks within the Twitter staff itself that have been pushing and moving for a better culture and community on the site so that people have, widespread enjoyment and not just the personal fifis of a select group of people on this that use the site, right? They've gone on to be on places like Gab. I know Trump was supposedly starting his own social media network, which has not really materialized, I guess, the way envisioned. The president himself has said that he has no intention on going back to Twitter, but it's just going to be interesting whether he goes back or not. Is irrelevant. Like the fact that Elon Musk is just trying to shift the burden or the way in which the content and the site is operating is a warning flag for a lot of groups. There has been a real push for platform accountability. There is a coalition of organizations that want to fix the feed. And it's not just targeted at Twitter. It's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, all the major platforms have a similar issue in terms of the algorithm, in terms of content moderation, and in terms of, a real lack of platform accountability. Elon Musk has said that he will enforce the laws that exist in the United States. There are very few laws that actually directly apply. I mean, I would actually argue, say there are no laws that directly apply to what has been proliferating on social media sites for the last several years. So the Fix the Feed Coalition, it's groups like Free Press, the Color of Change, Kairos. It's just a bunch of organizations that have three major points. They want these social media corporations to take 3 steps in terms of fixing their feed. They're not trying to tell them how to do their business. You can have your business model. Like if your business model is built on hate, that's a problem, right? So when we're getting targeted ads from, not just simply that we're getting targeted ads from Fox News and different problems thinking about Google and like targeted ads, because I know that I'll be looking at articles on the site I work for and I'll see a targeted ad from Tucker Carlson, I guess because I write about politics and I cover politics. It's just, oh, here, this is politics. So we have a whole issue in terms of platforms profiting off of hate, profiting off of, harassment in terms of the content that's being proliferated. But at the same time, we see a stifling of, attempts to debunk, bad information, or we just see a stifling of conversation and people expressing themselves. I know one thing that's come up a lot, particularly with Black and other women and people of color, has been like when they try to call out racism or call out white people for doing bad things, they're the ones who get banned, right? So we also see like these glaring issues in content moderation because it's not very clear on whether it's a automatic content, like, oh, this violates the I think Syra Rao, who's a good friend, had posted an article from the Huffington Post, and it was something about challenging white women or calling white people in, and that was flagged as something that violated, community terms on either Instagram or Facebook. I mean, they're all Meta, but I can't remember which specific platform. And so what was interesting, though, is that the content moderation will just look like, oh, that violates the rules without actually looking at to like what the exact content is. But then you'll see, content or posts or comments, or there's harassment that happens in people's inboxes from, predominantly white folks who are harassing, who are targeting, who are just saying blatantly racist, homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic stuff and really like ragging on people. But that won't get flagged. Like I personally have been harassed and attacked by someone, but because they're not directly adding me, even though their Twitter timeline, even though their Facebook posts are a complete fixation on me with complete fabrications, that doesn't necessarily quite violate the community agreements. You know what I'm saying? So there's all this stuff going on in terms of the platform. So when Elon Musk is talking about reversing the Trump ban, that's just like a real signal that he's going to let the floodgates open, or at least that's the impression. And the question is whether or not people are going to remove themselves. Are people going to leave the app? I just want to read the three from the Fix the Feed coalition. Hold on for a second, because I thought I had them pulled up real quick. Hold on. The Fix the Feed coalition. They want the algorithm fixed, right? So fix the algorithm. Stop promoting the most incendiary, hateful content. I mean, we see this often, right? Like Trump is a clear example of that. Like even though he wasn't being promoted, like allowing Trump would have clear violations of Twitter's rules in particular. Facebook too. Facebook has had a different approach. He doesn't have a permanent ban on Facebook. He has like a ban. It's like a particular period of time, and there's a Facebook board of governance, which some advocates have said is really a sham. There's a Facebook board of governance, and then there's like a shadow, like advocate led. That's the real Facebook board of governance is what they call themselves. I could be getting that wrong, but that's generally like really looking at the way in which Trump is allowed in particular, but other individuals are allowed to misuse these platforms. So Trump knowingly would spread false information, right? And people would spend time trying to debunk him. But he had such a massive following. He had such a massive reach because of that following, because just ordinarily like an account that large just has a much farther reach than an account like mine, right? So myself or other people could try to debunk and challenge what Trump is saying all we want to. And that's the type of world that Elon Musk thinks is absolutely fair. But he's completely disregarding the way the modeling, the way the algorithms are already set up. It would allow for that type of bad information to be spread and really like boost it, even more. The other thing they want to do is protect people equally, staff up to protect democracy for all across all languages. So this also is not just about here domestically. specifically, this is also the way in which, these are all global products. Like all the social media accounts or social media sites are global products. We have seen conversations on how social media has impacted elections in the United States, but it's definitely played a role, whether it was in Brexit in the UK or we're talking about in places like the Philippines. There have been really clear examples of the way in which, and not just the way in which social media and the lack of content moderation, or in some instances, allowing, governments to dictate the oppression or suppression of people being able to use these platforms to speak out about things happening with the government, right? So there are different ways that the social media giants have responded to political pressure in other countries that are inequitable and that actually deny people, their right to speak up. And then the last thing is like, show us the receipts, disclose your business models and moderation practices. And so that has to do with like, there's a lot of shrouded secrecy in what these sites claim they're doing. We've seen testimony in particular, more so with Zuckerberg before Congress. And there are a lot of claims that are made about different things. But I think with the Facebook leaks in particular, it has been shown that there are levels that are going on inside. I mean, Facebook just recently admitted that it didn't know exactly what data it was collecting from everyone. So it didn't know exactly how it could approach protecting that data. Like, I'm sorry, you have baby Skynet just taking all of our data and you don't know what it's being used for or how to go about protecting it. That's a bit of a problem, my guy. So I mean, when we're talking about like, whether or not Elon Musk is taking over, what will happen, reversing Trump, what does that look like? Because it's also possible, like I said, like whether Trump comes back, but reversing your Trump ban and looking at the type of information that Trump was trying to proliferate, in particular around January 6th, is what got him booted off. That type of information, that type of language has been curtailed a bit more on the platform. So, I mean, this to me is really Elon Musk signaling, as he's already said, the end to content moderation as it currently exists, and it's lacking in many ways already. What I also think is interesting is the conversation folks are having about leaving platforms, right? Like, will people leave the platform? I did an interview recently, which hopefully will be up on the News One site this weekend. I'm just talking with some Black Twitter experts in particular about like this whole idea of ceding ground and leading spaces around the content moderation issue. And one of the things that a professor who has studied this, he's also, I wouldn't just talk to an academic about Twitter if they weren't also avid, witty, amazing Twitter users themselves. And so what he was saying to me is just like, there are tools, though, even with some of the issues around content moderation, there are tools that we can use ourselves to protect us on these platforms in varying degrees. How we curate our experience is still something within our power and has not been removed from us. So for those who do choose to stay on these sites, I know folks have talked about, a mass exodus, and there's some speculation that, people saw drops in their follower count the day it was announced that Elon Musk was successfully purchasing Twitter. And that follower count drop has been attributed to more so people leaving the platform and then more right-wing folks joining, because you also saw on the converse more conservative folks having like these huge growths in followers. So I mean, whether or not that's actually the case, whether it was cleaning up potential bots on the site or whatever the case may be, we can actually use like curation. There are a bunch of things that I no longer see. I usually don't see attacks or negative stuff when I'm on Twitter personally, just because it probably doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to, but I don't see it because I have just certain phrases, words, accounts. I looked at my block list on both Facebook and Twitter recently. I was like, wow, I've blocked a lot of people. But you do what you do for your peace of mind, not because you're trying to create an echo chamber. And that's the other thing, right? People think that content moderation, people think that like having good conversations in particular spaces is about creating an echo chamber for yourself. Now, there are instances where people will create an echo chamber for themselves, where they want to just be around like-minded folks who are reinforcing what they think and believe. But creating a space where you are free from harassment or minimize harassment is not something that anyone should shy away from doing. And so you definitely want to walk through, like, if there are certain words and phrases. I mean, even if just for your peace of mind, you want to make one of the accounts. Like for me, Instagram is all about K-dramas and puppies and self-help posts. Like I don't see certain things on certain platforms unless someone directly shares it with me, and I don't mind having it that way. It appreciates my enjoyment. So, I know there are folks who are of the mind that I don't want to be on this platform. I find it funny, though, when people are like, I'm not going to use Twitter anymore. I'm just going to use Instagram. It's like Instagram is owned by Meta, boo. I mean, Instagram may not have as many of the same issues as Facebook, but it's still Facebook. It's still Zuckerberg. So, I mean, we can't run because the billionaires own every damn thing that we utilize as a part of our daily lives. And I think it's totally reasonable to expect that because of the way in which they have made sure these platforms are a part of people's daily lives, are part of the way people do business, are part of the way we do our politics. I mean, when you're thinking about digital organizing, being able to reach folks, through different platforms, especially when you're a smaller candidate that cannot afford to be on TV in your market, it's a huge, it has become a huge public good, even though it's privately owned. And as such, there should be some moderation and regulation in the process. But that's all I have to say about Twitter and Elon Musk. And so I have one more thing that I thought was really cool, but if folks wanted to call in, because I was supposed to say this earlier, I'm not really used to doing a call in, but if folks want to call in, David gave me the number. The number is 404-400-3250. We have about 8 more minutes with me before we kick it over to the team. So you can call in if you want to, 404-400-3250. We are taking calls. If you want to talk about the things I talked about this morning, or if you have a good morning greeting and something short and brief that you want to share, holler at us. The last thing on the agenda for this morning is, a pretty cool thing happened yesterday. So I did actually have more good news. A pretty good thing happened yesterday. Sundiata Acoli, who's 85 years old, who has been incarcerated for nearly 50 years, former Black Panther, former member of the Black National, sorry, I almost said the NAACP, Black Liberation Army. I actually got a text from my stepdad, who also is former Panther, former BLA member. Very excited about this moment. Sundiata Acoli won his parole appeal yesterday in the state of New Jersey. Acoli was a part of, a group that was charged with the killing of a New Jersey state trooper in 1973. And he has actually been eligible for parole, I think, for a little over 20 years now. And they have systemically they have repeatedly denied his parole, despite the fact that he's been, quote unquote, a model inmate. He has, mentored and advised others in their parole processes. I think listening to, if I remember correctly from listening to the hearing for this appeal, they actually talked about how he was charged, like he was given the task of preparing people who were, on their way to returning, back into society. So you have Sundiata Acoli, who has, checked off all the boxes in terms of being eligible for parole, basically being denied parole because, one, the underlying incident resulting in his conviction involved the killing of a state trooper, but also because of just the politics and who he is as a person and, his former beliefs. And so he, had to go through a lot of hoops to prove that he recognizes that violence is not the means to social change that he once thought when he was younger. But after nearly 50 years, he is not released yet, but he is on his way to receiving a little taste once again of freedom. He'll be returning home to his daughter. His family has been waiting eagerly for years, for decades now, for his return. Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey and the New Jersey State Troopers both issue statements expressing disappointment in the New Jersey Supreme Court's decision. I mean, the New Jersey Supreme Court's decision was strictly by the book. It was strictly on the merits of Okoli's parole requests and appeal. And it's basically said like the parole board did not give any like substantial reasoning. They did not show that Sundiata was likely to, reoffend. I mean, the man is 85 years old, right? And so they tried to argue that because of his past history almost 50 years ago, that he would be likely to, reoffend again at 85 years old. And, the political motivation behind keeping him behind bars, behind keeping several former Panthers, several former Black liberation, leaders and folks behind bars is very clear. You also have folks like Mutulu Shakur. A lot of these folks are aging. They're aging elders. They also have, poor health. Mutulu actually has the same cancer my father does, multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer that requires, stem cell therapy, replacement treatment and stuff. He's also been eligible for parole for the last several years and has been systemically denied. They say Sundiata has dementia among several other health conditions. And also when you're just thinking about, when you're also just thinking about incarceration and keeping elder folks in jail. There is the Freedom All hashtag, thinking about folks like Leonard Peltier, thinking about Mumia Abu-Jabal, but you also have folks like Imam Jamil Abdul Alamin. You have, I mentioned Mutulu Shakur. You have so many different people who are still incarcerated, who are of an older age, who have health issues, who aren't quote unquote threat to society, but they are being kept, locked up because the system considers, punishment, more important than whether or not someone has quote unquote paid the time for this alleged crime, right? Wherever you stand on abolition or not, I mean, thinking about there is no valid reason to keep older folks who, locked up. Like there was a whole series done not too long ago about, I think it was in Mississippi, folks who had sentences that had been virtually converted, essentially converted to life sentences because they were sentenced, to a particular period of time in jail. But because there were like some weird hiccups or racist enough stuff in the law, they were not actually released. So you had someone maybe sentenced to maybe like 8 years and they end up being in jail for like 40 years, right? And so there are whole movements geared towards, or there is a movement geared towards releasing aging prisoners, just also recognizing the additional costs. I think we have a call I'm getting on the chat as we're wrapping it up from 651. We have a few minutes before we kick it over to Miss Georgia. 651, good morning, and what's on your mind today?
Hello. This is Tyler. I've called in before.
Hi, Tyler.
Sorry.
You're fine.
So I just think this is very emblematic of like our prison system and how people can just stay incarcerated for like years, decades, without any real justice, and a lot of people whose lives are just irrevocably changed. And I think we clearly need to replace our current system, just completely abolish it.
Absolutely. Tyler, you just spoke life into the conversation, and I really appreciate you for calling in and sharing that. I mean, absolutely agree. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we are wrapping up as I transition over to Miss Georgia and the team, but definitely agree, Tyler. Like this is a case that is emblematic of everything that's wrong with the system. The New Jersey police trooper, their statement, and Governor Phil Murphy, both of them are just we need to. No one who kills a cop should ever should ever be released, or, the law was changed. And if he was sentenced under the new law, which I believe the law was changed like 25 years or 20 something years after he had already been incarcerated, the law had been changed. If he was charged under the new law, he wouldn't be getting out now. And I talked to the trooper's widow and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't cheer for loss of life for anyone. I don't wish on that on anyone's family. But at the same time, people are punished under the existing system. They're punished in a certain period of time. The law says that someone's eligible for release when they're released, and there are certain factors to consider for their release. He has met all those factors, case closed. All the feelings and other things. And the Supreme Court actually wrote this, that, the passion or the political feelings about this have no bearing on the actual decision. The decision is what it is based on law. And so if only we had more analysis of these parole decisions with that lens, and hopefully we'll see other folks being released. And we have seen some folks being released since the start of the pandemic because of some of the recognition of keeping, elder folks incarcerated. And I do agree with Tyler in terms of how we need to fundamentally change this entire system. So I'm Anoa Changa, and I have been filling in for Mr. Benjamin Dixon, twin, this morning, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Coming up next is, Miss Georgia Fort doing all the amazing things she always does. Peace.